We appreciate every one of you. We'd love to know where in the world you're watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now let's dive into today's story. The steady beep of heart rate monitors and the metallic clang of surgical instruments had always been Dr. Nathan Williams' sanctuary. In the operating room, everything made sense. Every incision had a purpose. Every suture brought healing. And there was no room for deception. If only life outside those sterile walls were as straightforward. Beautiful work, Dr. Williams, his surgical assistant remarked as Nathan completed the final suture on his young patient's heart. Another life saved. Nathan nodded, maintaining his focus until the last stitch was perfect. He'd built his reputation as New York City's leading pediatric cardiovascular surgeon on this very attention to detail. Every child on his table was treated as if they were his own, Maya or Lucas. "Close up for me, Dr. Carter," he instructed his resident. "I'll check on the Martinez boy from yesterday's procedure." Peeling off his surgical gloves and mask, Nathan glanced at his watch. 7:30 p.m. Another late night at St. Catherine's Hospital. Emma would understand. She always did. Too understanding, perhaps now, that he thought about it. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife. "Don't worry about dinner. Taking the twins to Lou's for pizza night. Get some rest." Lou, his younger brother, had been spending an increasing amount of time with his family lately. At first, Nathan had been grateful for Lou's presence during his frequent medical conferences and late surgeries. Now, something about those casual dinner invitations and impromptu visits left an uneasy feeling in his gut. "Dr. Williams?" A nurse caught his attention. "Your mother called. She said she'd drop by your house later to help Mrs. Williams with some event planning." "The annual charity gala," Nathan replied. "Right." Emma and his mother, Claire, had been inseparable lately, deep in preparations for the event. Nathan had always appreciated their close relationship, but lately, their whispered conversations and sudden silences when he entered a room had become noticeable. After checking on his post-op patients and updating their charts, Nathan decided to head home. The house was dark when he pulled into the driveway, save for the warm glow from the kitchen windows. He could see Emma's silhouette moving about, probably making coffee with his mother. Using his key, Nathan entered, through the side door that led to his home office. He needed to review some journals before tomorrow's procedures anyway. The house's heating system hummed to life as he settled into his leather chair, the familiar sound almost masking the voices drifting up through the vent. "He's been asking questions about the twins' eye color again." His mother's voice was tight with concern. "What did you tell him?" Emma's response was barely audible. "The same thing we always say, that your grandmother had blue eyes. But Claire, he's a doctor. He understands genetics better than most." There was a pause, followed by the clink of coffee cups. "He can never know the twins are loose. It would destroy him." The medical journal slipped from Nathan's suddenly numb fingers, landing with a soft thud on his desk. The words hung in the air like poison gas, seeping into every corner of his carefully constructed world. "Lou's been careful," Emma's voice continued, unaware of the devastation occurring above. "The family cabin trips have been the perfect cover. Nathan's always so busy with the emergency room rotation during the holidays." 15 years, Claire sighed. "We've kept this secret for 15 years. Sometimes I look at Maya and Lucas, and I see Lou so clearly in their faces. Those blue eyes." Nathan sat motionless, his trained surgeon's hands gripping the arms of his chair. Years of medical training had taught him to process information methodically, to maintain composure in the face of crisis. That training kicked in automatically. His mother and wife were discussing a long-term deception. The twins, his 15-year-old children, were potentially his brother's biological offspring. Multiple parties, including his own mother, had maintained this deception. The next morning, Nathan maintained his usual routine with mechanical precision. He kissed Emma goodbye, ruffled the twins' hair as they rushed to catch the school bus, and headed to his office. But instead of reviewing patient files, he made 2 calls. The first was to a private investigator recommended by a colleague who'd handled medical malpractice cases. The second was to his personal attorney, James Reynolds. "I need a comprehensive background check," Nathan instructed the investigator. "Focus on travel records, credit card statements, and phone records. 15 years of data, if possible." To Reynolds, his instructions were equally specific. I need to know my options regarding trust funds I've established for my children. And I need information about divorce laws in New York, particularly regarding infidelity. Over the next 2 weeks, Nathan became a silent observer of his own life. He watched Lou's casual visits with new awareness, noting the subtle glances between his brother and wife. He studied old family photos, seeing what he'd missed before, how the twins' features echoed Lou's, how Emma seemed to lean slightly toward his brother in every group shot. The cabin visits took on new significance. For years, he'd accepted Emma's insistence that he shouldn't feel guilty about working holiday shifts. The kids love spending time with Uncle Lou, she'd say, and you're saving lives? That's what matters. One evening, Nathan sat in his office reviewing the investigator's preliminary report. Credit card statements showed regular charges at a small bed and breakfast near Lou's cabin dating back 16 years. Phone records revealed patterns of calls and texts between Emma and Lou, always increasing during Nathan's medical conferences. A soft knock at his office door made him quickly slide the papers into a drawer. Maya stood in the doorway, her blue eyes, Lou's eyes, bright with excitement. "Dad, can you help me with my biology homework? We're studying genetics, and I'm having trouble with dominance patterns." The irony almost made him laugh. Instead, he gestured to the chair beside his desk. "Come here, sweetheart. What's giving you trouble?" "We're doing Punnett squares," Maya explained, spreading her textbook open. "I don't understand how two brown-eyed parents can have a blue-eyed child." Nathan felt his jaw tighten, but kept his voice steady. "It is rare. In fact, when both parents have brown eyes, there's only about a 6 to 7% chance of having a blue-eyed child." "But Ethan and I both have blue eyes," Maya mused. "What are the odds of that?" "Astronomical," Nathan muttered, then forced a smile. "But your grandmother always said your great-grandmother had blue eyes. Sometimes genetics can skip generations." The lie tasted bitter on his tongue. Maya beamed at him, accepting the explanation without question, just as he had for 15 years. Later that night, Nathan heard Emma on the phone in their bedroom. "Of course I'll help with the cabin maintenance next weekend," she was saying softly. "Nathan has that cardiology conference in Boston." No, he doesn't suspect anything. He never has. The familiar sound of his wife's laughter, once beloved, now felt like shards of glass in his chest. "You know how he is, Lou? Always buried in his medical journals, saving other people's children." Nathan retreated to his office, closing the door silently. He opened his laptop and began documenting everything. Dates, times, patterns of deception. His medical training had taught him the importance of thorough documentation. Evidence would be crucial for what was to come. The next day, he scheduled a DNA test under the guise of routine medical screening for the twins. As their father, legal father, he corrected himself bitterly. He had every right to authorize it. The results arrived in a sealed envelope a week later, confirming what he already knew. Probability of paternity, 0%. Nathan stored the results in his safe, along with the investigator's reports and a small recording device he'd hidden in the kitchen after that first overheard conversation. Each new piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of his marriage, his family, his trust. At the hospital, he maintained his usual schedule of surgeries and consultations. His colleagues noticed no change in his demeanor. Dr. Nathan Williams remained what he'd always been: precise, professional, dedicated to his young patients. "You're a miracle worker," a grateful mother told him after. He'd successfully repaired her son's congenital heart defect. "How do you stay so calm, knowing children's lives are in your hands?" "Focus on what's important," Nathan replied, watching her stroke her son's hair. "Everything else is just noise." The hospital fundraiser approached, and Nathan watched Emma and his mother flutter about with their preparations. "They've chosen family ties as the theme this year," Nathan noted without a trace of irony. "You'll be there, won't you, dear?" his mother asked over Sunday dinner. "I know how busy you are, but it means so much to Emma." Nathan noted how she emphasized his wife's name, playing on his guilt, as she'd probably done for years. "Of course, mother. I wouldn't miss it." Lou cleared his throat from across the table. "I could cover for you at the hospital if you need, big brother. What are families for, right? The twins giggled at some private joke with their uncle, and Nathan saw Emma's hand brush Lou's as she passed the breadbasket. The casual intimacy of the gesture, displayed right under his nose, made his stomach turn. That night, after everyone had gone home, Nathan refined his plan. The trust fund for the twins would remain untouched. They were innocent in this, but he would ensure they couldn't access it without learning the truth first. Coming to bed? Emma called from upstairs. Soon, he answered, just need to finish some patient notes. Instead, he began making arrangements. A trauma surgery position in Seattle. A new apartment paid for in cash. A separate bank account that couldn't be traced to his current life. 2 weeks later, Nathan performed his last surgery at St. Catherine's Hospital, a complex procedure on a 6-year-old girl with a rare heart condition. As always, his work was flawless. You're a gift to this hospital, the chief of surgery told him afterward. These children are lucky to have you. Nathan thought of his own children, who'd never truly been his. Sometimes the best thing we can do for others is to walk away. That night, he left a single envelope on his desk. Inside was everything. The DNA results, the investigation reports, transcripts of recorded conversations, photos documenting years of deception. No accusations, no angry notes. Just cold, hard evidence. He walked through the quiet house one last time, pausing at the twins' rooms. Maya's violin lay silent on its stand. She'd inherited Lou's musical talent. Ethan's soccer trophies gleamed in the darkness. He had his biological father's athletic ability. Nathan touched nothing, changed nothing. He simply walked out, leaving behind a life built on lies, taking with him only the truth he'd discovered and the dignity he'd maintained. In his car, he glanced at his phone one last time. A text from Emma. Lou's cabin needs some work. Taking the twins up this weekend while you're at the conference. Love you. Nathan turned off the phone and started the engine. As he drove away from the house, his medical training once again served him well. When removing a tumor, after all, the key was to excise it completely, leaving no diseased tissue behind. He'd done exactly that. In Seattle, a new hospital waited. New patients who needed his skills. A new life where every relationship would be built on truth rather than comfort. Honesty rather than convenience. Behind him, the house grew small in his rearview mirror. Inside, his wife likely slept peacefully, unaware that her carefully maintained web of lies was about to unravel. His mother would arrive tomorrow for coffee and more conspiratorial conversations. Lou would probably drop by playing the role of devoted brother and uncle. But Dr. Nathan Williams wouldn't be there to witness it. He had surgeries to perform, lives to save, and a future to build. One where every success or failure would be his own, untainted by the betrayal of those he'd once trusted most. The highway stretched before him, dark but clear. Like the path of a scalpel, there was no room for hesitation once the cut began. Nathan accelerated, leaving behind the wreckage of his old life with the same precision he'd used to save countless others. Some wounds, he knew, could only heal once the source of infection was removed. He'd removed himself from the diseased tissue of lies and betrayal. The healing would come later, on his own terms, in his own time. For now, the night belonged to truth, and truth alone. The Seattle rain suited Dr. Nathan Williams' new life. The constant drumming against hospital windows matched the steady rhythm of trauma surgery, where every second counted and there was no time for dwelling on the past. 6 months had passed since he'd left New York, and he'd already earned a reputation at Northwest Memorial for his exceptional work. In emergency medicine, Dr. Williams' multiple casualty incident coming in. 5 minutes out, a nurse called through the trauma bay doors. Nathan pulled on his surgical gown with practiced efficiency. The familiar routine grounded him, just as it had during those first raw weeks after leaving everything behind. "What's the situation?" he asked the emergency team assembling around him. "Multi-car pileup on I-5. 3 critical, 2 moderate. First victim has severe internal bleeding." As the trauma bay erupted into controlled chaos, Nathan felt the familiar clarity descend. Here, there was no deception, no manipulation, just the pure focus of saving lives. Back in New York, his disappearance had created its own kind of chaos. His attorney, James Reynolds, kept him updated through secure channels. Emma filed a missing persons report. Reynolds informed him during one of their monthly calls. The police investigation found nothing suspicious. They're treating it as a voluntary disappearance. And the practice? Nathan's voice remained neutral, professional. Sold to the medical group you recommended. The proceeds have been transferred to your new accounts. I've maintained the twins' trust funds separately, as instructed. Nathan nodded, though Reynolds couldn't see it. Any attempts to access the trust? Not yet. But Emma's been asking questions about it. She seems concerned about the restrictions you placed on it. Of course, she was concerned. The trust fund could only be accessed with Nathan's direct approval before the twins turned 25. It was his insurance that the truth would eventually come out. Has she married him yet? Nathan kept his tone clinical, as if discussing a patient's history. No, Reynolds replied, but Lou moved in 3 months after you left. They're telling everyone their relationship developed afterward, playing the grieving wife, finding comfort with her brother-in-law. Nathan's laugh held no humor. How convenient for them. In New York, Emma maintained appearances with practiced skill. She'd organized a small memorial service, where she shed appropriate tears and accepted condolences with perfect grace. Nathan was under so much pressure, she told concerned friends. The demands of his practice, the long hours. Sometimes people just break. Lou stood supportively by her side, the caring brother-in-law helping the family through crisis. Only Claire, watching from the church pew, noticed how his hand lingered too long on Emma's back, how their shared glances held too much intimacy for their supposed roles. The twins, now 16, processed their father's disappearance differently. Maya threw herself into her studies, spending hours in the school library. Ethan became quieter, watching his mother and uncle with increasingly suspicious eyes. Mom seems different, he commented to Maya one evening as they did homework. Like she's relieved or something. Maya looked up from her biology textbook, the same one she'd once asked her father to help her understand. What do you mean? I don't know, he said. She laughs more now. And Uncle Lou's always around. Doesn't it seem weird to you? Everything's weird now, Maya replied. But she'd noticed too. The way their mother hummed while cooking dinner for Lou, how comfortable they seemed in each other's space. At Northwest Memorial, Nathan built a new reputation. His colleagues knew nothing of his past. He was simply the brilliant trauma surgeon who worked impossible hours and never discussed his personal life. You should come for dinner sometime, Dr. Sarah Chun, another trauma surgeon, suggested after a particularly difficult shift. My husband makes amazing lasagna. Thank you, but I prefer to keep my life simple, Nathan replied, his tone polite but final. Sarah studied him thoughtfully. You know, there's a difference between keeping things simple and building walls. Nathan met her gaze steadily. Walls serve a purpose, Dr. Chun. They protect what's valuable. In his apartment overlooking Puget Sound, Nathan maintained his own form of documentation. Reynolds sent him news clippings, social media updates, and reports from a private investigator in New York. One photo showed Emma and Lou at a restaurant, his hand casually covering hers on the table. Another captured them at Maya's piano recital, standing closer than in-laws should. The twins appeared in many images, their features increasingly reflecting Lou's genetics as they matured. Nathan stored everything methodically, building a timeline of truth that would eventually shatter their carefully constructed lies. Meanwhile, Claire struggled with her role in the deception. She'd started seeing a therapist, though she could never reveal the true source of her guilt. I've lost my son, she told the therapist, technically truthful but deliberately vague. Not to death, but circumstances I helped create. Do you want to elaborate on those circumstances? The therapist prompted. Claire clutched her tissue tighter. I thought I was protecting him. Isn't that what mothers are supposed to do? Protect their children from pain? Sometimes protection causes more harm than truth, the therapist replied, unknowingly echoing Nathan's own philosophy. The twins' 17th birthday arrived, marked by a lavish party at Lou's cabin, now a second home to the family. Emma wore a new dress, laughing at Lou's jokes with the easy familiarity of a long-term partner. To family, Lou toasted, his arm around Emma's waist. "And to new beginnings." Maya smiled, but Ethan watched them with increasingly troubled eyes. Later, he found old photo albums in the cabin storage room. Pictures of his father, the man he still thought of as his father, showed a different family dynamic. In those images, Nathan stood slightly apart, his smile genuine, but his eyes missing the subtle signs of strain that Ethan now recognized in retrospect. There were Christmas photos from this same cabin, years of them where Nathan was conspicuously absent. He was always working, Emma explained when Ethan asked about the photos. "Your father chose his career over family time, didn't he?" Ethan wondered aloud. Or was that just convenient for everyone else? Emma's face flickered with something. Guilt? Fear? Before she composed herself. "You don't understand adult relationships, sweetheart. Things are complicated. They seem pretty simple now," Ethan observed. "You and Uncle Lou seem to have it all figured out." Lou stepped in, his tone carrying a warning edge. "Watch your tone, buddy. Your mother's been through enough." In Seattle, Nathan received regular updates about these developments from Reynolds. Each report strengthened his resolve. The trust fund remained untouched, growing steadily, waiting for the moment when truth would become currency. Emma's asked about claiming abandonment for a divorce. Reynolds informed him during their monthly call. "I've advised that it's possible after 2 years." "Let her," Nathan replied. "It changes nothing about the trust fund conditions." His new life developed its own rhythm. Trauma surgery suited him. The need for quick decisions, the clarity of purpose, the absence of pretense. His colleagues respected his privacy, and if they noticed how he worked every Christmas, they didn't comment. 3 years after his departure, Emma filed for divorce, citing abandonment. The New York medical community buzzed with gossip when she and Lou announced their relationship shortly afterward. "They were there for each other during a difficult time," Claire explained to curious friends. The practiced lie was smooth on her tongue. These things happen. The twins, now 18, faced their own struggles with the changing family dynamic. Maya immersed herself in college applications aiming for medical schools across the country. Ethan chose psychology, his own experience driving him to understand family dynamics and hidden truths. "Do you ever wonder about Dad?" Maya asked Ethan one night as they sat on the cabin's porch during another family gathering. Inside, they could hear their mother's laughter mingling with Lou's voice. "All the time," Ethan replied. "But I wonder more about what we're not being told." In Seattle, Nathan's reputation continued to grow. He published groundbreaking papers on trauma surgery techniques, his name becoming known in medical circles nationwide. If anyone connected him to the missing New York pediatric surgeon, they never mentioned it. "Your focus is remarkable," Dr. Sarah Chun commented after watching him perform a particularly difficult emergency surgery. "It's like you leave everything else at the door." "There's no room for distraction in trauma," Nathan replied. "The patient deserves our complete attention." "And outside the OR?" Nathan's smile held no warmth. "Outside the OR, everyone deserves the truth, even when it's surgical in its precision." 5 years after his disappearance, Nathan received a different kind of update from Reynolds. The twins are asking questions about the trust fund. They're starting to realize there are conditions they don't understand. "Good," Nathan replied. "Let them ask questions. Questions lead to truth." In New York, those questions created increasing tension. Emma and Lou had married in a small ceremony, their story of finding love after loss accepted by most. But Ethan, now studying psychology, recognized patterns of deception in their behavior. "Have you noticed how grandmother can barely look at us sometimes?" he asked Maya during one of their regular coffee meetings. "Especially when Mom and Lou are couple-like." Maya, deep in pre-med studies, approached everything with scientific precision. "There are a lot of inconsistencies. The timeline of their relationship, the stories about Dad's work schedule, the trust fund, and our eyes," Ethan added quietly. "Remember that genetics homework you struggled with? About dominant and recessive traits?" Maya's own blue eyes, so like Lou's, widened slightly. "Don't go there, Ethan. Some things are better left unknown." Ethan interrupted. "Isn't that what they've been telling us for years?" In Seattle, Nathan maintained his vigilance. Each successful surgery, each saved life, reinforced his conviction that truth, however painful, was preferable to comfortable lies. He kept every piece of evidence, every photo, every report, waiting for the moment when questions would demand answers. "You've revolutionized our trauma response protocols," the chief of surgery told him during his fifth-year review. "But you're still a mystery to everyone here." Nathan met his gaze steadily. Sometimes mysteries exist because the truth hasn't found its moment yet. As the sixth year of his new life approached, Nathan knew that moment was coming. The twins would eventually need access to their trust fund. They would have questions, and unlike their mother, their grandmother, and the uncle they didn't know was their father, Nathan would offer them the one thing they'd never had: absolute truth, supported by evidence, without cushioning or compromise. In his apartment overlooking the darkening waters of Puget Sound, Nathan reviewed the files he'd maintained so meticulously. 6 years of documented lies. 6 years of waiting. 6 years of building a life based on truth rather than comfort. The rain continued its steady rhythm against his windows, matching the beat of his unchanged resolve. In trauma surgery, timing was everything. The same principle applied to truth. It wasn't enough to possess it. You had to know when to wield it. That time was approaching. Nathan could feel it with the same certainty he felt in the or when a patient's life hung in the balance. Soon, the careful lies constructed in New York would collapse under the weight of the evidence he'd gathered. He was ready. He'd always been ready. The truth, after all, was like a perfectly planned surgical incision, clean, precise, and ultimately healing, despite the pain it caused. Dr. Nathan Williams' morning routine at Northwest Memorial remained unchanged for 6 years. Review charts, check post-op patients, plan the day's trauma procedures. So, when his assistant knocked on his office door at 7:30 a.m., he expected the usual updates. Instead, he found himself staring at two faces he knew better than his own. Maya and Ethan stood in his doorway, no longer the 15-year-old children he'd left behind, but poised 21-year-old adults. Maya had grown into her features, loose features he noted clinically, while Ethan carried himself with the same athletic grace as his biological father. "Hello, Dad." Maya spoke first, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. "Or should we call you Dr. Williams now?" Nathan remained seated, his expression neutral. "Come in." "Close the door." They entered his office with measured steps, 6 years of questions reflected in their eyes, the same blue eyes that had once sparked his initial doubts. "We need access to the trust fund," Maya continued, taking charge. "We've tried going through your attorney, but he's immovable without your direct approval. And college expenses are mounting," Ethan added, his tone less confrontational than his sister's. "The conditions you set. We have to wait until we're 25 unless you approve early release." Nathan studied them silently. They'd grown up well, despite everything. Maya clutched her pre-med textbooks to her chest, following his path, not knowing it wasn't her genetic destiny. Ethan carried a psychology textbook, perhaps unconsciously seeking answers to his own family's dysfunction. Without a word, Nathan opened his desk drawer and removed a thick envelope. 6 years of evidence, waiting for this moment. "Before we discuss the trust fund," he said quietly, "you should understand why it exists with those specific conditions." He slid the envelope across his desk. Maya reached for it, but Ethan stopped her. "Why did you leave?" he demanded. 6 years of nothing. Mom said it was burnout, that the pressure of your mother," Nathan interrupted, his voice carrying the same precision he used in surgery, "has been lying to you since before you were born." Maya's hand shook as she opened the envelope. DNA results fell out first, followed by photographs spanning 15 years. Christmas gatherings at Lou's cabin, secret meetings documented by private investigators, bank statements showing patterns of deception. "I'm actually your uncle," Nathan stated, watching their faces as reality crashed through years of careful lies. "The trust fund you're seeking? Ask your mother why she spent Christmas with Uncle Lou every year. Your grandmother has the rest of the story." The color drained from Maya's face as she stared at the DNA results. Ethan grabbed the edge of Nathan's desk, his knuckles white. "That's impossible." Maya whispered. Mom and Lou only got together after you. After I disappeared? Nathan's laugh held no humor. Look at the dates on those photos, Maya. Look at the credit card statements from the bed and breakfast near Lou's cabin. Count backward from your birth dates. Ethan was already doing the math, his psychology training letting him see the patterns they'd missed. The Christmas trips, Mom's insistence on going to the cabin every year, the way Grandmother Claire cries when she looks at our baby pictures. While I worked emergency room shifts, Nathan finished a schedule your mother carefully helped arrange with the hospital administration. Maya rifled through the photos, her medical training evident in her methodical examination. The genetic markers in these DNA results, they're conclusive. I ran the test twice, Nathan confirmed. Once when you were 15, once before I left. The results were identical. Why didn't you confront them? Ethan asked, his counselor's instincts emerging. Why just disappear? Nathan met his gaze steadily. Because some betrayals don't deserve the dignity of confrontation. Your mother, Lou, and Claire chose comfort over truth for 15 years. I chose truth over comfort when I left. A recording device slid from the envelope, the final piece of evidence. Maya pressed play, and Claire's voice filled the office. He can never know the twins are his brothers. It would destroy him. Emma's voice followed. Lou's been careful. The Christmas cabin trips have been perfect cover. Maya stopped the recording, her hand trembling. All those Christmas memories, they were just opportunities for them to maintain their deception, Nathan finished. Yes. Ethan slumped in his chair, his psychology textbook forgotten on the floor. Mom's relief when you disappeared. It wasn't about escaping a failing marriage. It was being free, to continue what they'd been doing all along. Nathan's voice remained clinical, detached. Your grandmother helped maintain the lie, thinking she was protecting everyone. In reality, she was just enabling their betrayal. Maya, future doctor that she was, had arranged the DNA results with scientific precision. These markers, they explain our blue eyes. The genetic impossibility that bothered you when you helped me with my biology homework. A 6 to 7% chance with two brown-eyed parents, Nathan quoted from that long-ago study session. More like 0 when one of those parents isn't actually a parent at all. Silence filled the office, broken only by the distant sounds of hospital activity. Maya and Ethan sat with their shattered reality, while Nathan watched them process truth's surgical precision. The trust fund. Ethan finally spoke, his voice hollow. You set those conditions knowing that eventually you'd need answers to access it, Nathan confirmed. Knowing that truth, however painful, is preferable to comfortable lies. Maya looked up from the evidence, tears tracking down her cheeks. Was any of it real? For the first time, Nathan's clinical demeanor cracked slightly. Every moment I spent being your father was real. Biology doesn't define family, Maya. Truth does. And now? Ethan asked. What happens now? Nathan gestured to the envelope. Now you have what your mother, Lou, and Claire never gave you. The complete truth, with evidence to support it. What you do with that truth is your choice. Maya gathered the evidence with shaking hands. We need time to process this. Take all the time you need, Nathan replied. The trust fund will be there when you're ready. Unlike your other family members, I won't pressure you or manipulate your choices. They left his office carrying the weight of truth, leaving Nathan alone with the familiar sounds of his hospital routine. He had one more surgery scheduled, life and death continuing regardless of personal revelations. The truth spread through their family like a controlled demolition, each revelation bringing down another facade of lies. Emma received the first shock when Maya confronted her in their New York home. DNA results spread across the kitchen table, where Claire had once whispered secrets through heating vents. How could you? Maya's voice shook with rage. 15 years of lies? Christmas trips planned around your affair? Emma's carefully maintained composure cracked. You don't understand. Lou and I. Save it, Ethan cut. In his counselor's training evident in his controlled anger. We've seen the evidence. All of it. The cabin receipts, the bank statements, grandmother's complicity. We were in love, Emma defended weakly. We didn't want to hurt anyone. So you chose to lie instead? Maya's laugh was bitter, reminiscent of Nathan's. To let us bond with our uncle while our father worked emergency room shifts you helped arrange? Lou arrived during the confrontation, his arrogant confidence faltering at the sight of the DNA results. Who gave you these? Our uncle, Ethan replied coldly. The man who actually acted like a father. Claire was next. Her carefully maintained poise crumbled when the twins presented her with the recorded conversation. She aged years in minutes, hearing her own voice detail the deception. I thought I was protecting everyone, she whispered. Nathan was such a good father. And you children were so happy. We were happy because we didn't know we were living a lie, Maya responded. You chose their comfort over our right to truth. The trust fund remained untouched. Maya and Ethan found other ways to fund their education, recognizing that accessing it would mean accepting the fruits of 15 years of deception. Months passed. Maya threw herself into her medical studies with renewed determination, no longer following what she thought was her father's path, but forging her own. Ethan's psychology practice gained depth from his personal experience with family trauma. Emma and Lou's marriage began to crumble under the weight of revealed truth. The passion that had fueled 15 years of deception couldn't sustain them once their comfortable lies were exposed. Was it worth it? Ethan asked them during one particularly heated family discussion. Trading truth for comfort? Trading integrity for convenience? Neither had an answer that didn't sound hollow. 1 year after the revelation, Nathan sat across from Maya and Ethan in a quiet Seattle restaurant. The twins had processed their anger, their grief, their sense of displacement. What remained was a cautious desire to know the man who had chosen truth over comfort. I'm considering pediatric surgery, Maya mentioned, watching Nathan's reaction. Not because of family legacy, but because I want to heal. Nathan nodded, understanding the distinction. Making choices based on truth rather than inherited expectations. That's wisdom, Maya. My practice is focusing on family trauma, Ethan added. Helping others navigate truth after deception. It's therapeutic. Truth often is, Nathan replied, even when it cuts deep. They shared a meal without pretense, without the weight of false roles and obligations. In New York, Emma and Lou's marriage had ended, unable to survive outside the greenhouse of secrecy they'd built. Claire sought forgiveness but found, as Nathan had known, that truth once buried grew thorns when unearthed. The trust fund remained intact, a testament to choices made and principles maintained. Maya and Ethan understood now why Nathan had placed those conditions, not as punishment, but as a path to truth. Do you regret leaving the way you did? Maya asked over dessert. Without hesitation, Nathan considered the question with his usual precision. Some cancers require complete excision. Clean margins. No compromised tissue left behind. Ethan, with his counselor's insight, nodded. You couldn't heal while maintaining contact with the source of infection. Precisely, Nathan confirmed. I chose truth over comfort, reality over pretense. Just as you're both doing now. They parted that evening with newfound understanding. Nathan returned to his trauma unit, where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. Maya resumed her medical studies, approaching healing from a perspective shaped by personal experience. Ethan continued helping others navigate their own paths to truth. In his hospital office, Nathan added a new photo beside his medical certificates. Not a false family portrait built on lies, but a simple snapshot of a quiet dinner with Maya and Ethan. 3 people who had chosen truth over comfort, healing over pretense. During rounds the next morning, a resident asked about a particularly complex trauma case. Sometimes, Nathan told them, the hardest diagnosis is the one that forces us to re-examine everything we thought we knew about ourselves. But truth, properly applied, always heals. The resident nodded, not knowing the personal weight behind those words. But Maya and Ethan would have understood. They'd learned, as Nathan had, that family could be rebuilt on truth's foundation even after lies had torn it apart. In the end, biology had made Nathan their uncle, but choosing truth had made him something more, a man worthy of the trust they now chose to place in him. Not out of obligation or deception, but out of respect for his unwavering commitment to truth. Epilogue 5 years later, the prestigious New York Medical Center's annual fundraiser buzzed with familiar faces, but Emma Masters, now just Emma Masters after her second divorce, stood alone. At the edge of the crowd, her designer dress couldn't hide how the years of revealed lies had aged her. At 49, she looked closer to 60, the price of deception etched in every premature line on her face. Dr. Maya Williams is giving the keynote speech. She overheard someone whisper, "Youngest head of pediatric cardiology in the hospital's history." Emma's hand tightened around her champagne glass. Her daughter, though she used Nathan's surname now, had deliberately not informed her about this honor. She'd learned about it through the hospital newsletter, like any other stranger. Maya took the stage with the same confidence Nathan had once shown in these halls. At 26, she'd surpassed every expectation, driven by a determination born from shattered illusions. Medicine, Maya began, her voice carrying through the silent auditorium, is built on trust. We trust in science, in methodology, in truth. Without truth, healing is impossible. In the back row, Lou Masters shifted uncomfortably. His once athletic frame had softened, his arrogance deflated by years of consequences. The affair that had seemed so passionate, so worth any deception, had crumbled under truth's weight. Now he worked at a small private practice in New Jersey, his reputation tainted by whispers that followed him from New York. My journey into medicine, Maya continued, was shaped by two men. One showed me that technical skill without integrity is worthless. The other demonstrated that truth, however painful, is the foundation of real healing. Emma knew which man was which. Her marriage to Lou had lasted barely 2 years after the truth emerged. The passion that had fueled 15 years of deception couldn't survive in daylight. They tried to maintain their relationship, claiming their love justified everything, but guilt and recrimination had poisoned every moment. The final break came during a heated argument about money. Their comfortable lifestyle, built on Lou's successful private practice, had collapsed when his patients learned about the affair. Who would trust a doctor who could deceive his own brother for 15 years? Emma had screamed during their last fight. You promised we'd be happy, that once we were free to be together, everything would be perfect. Happy. Lou's bitter laugh echoed her own delusions. We were happy in secret, Emma. We were happy while Nathan worked emergency room shifts we arranged. We were happy stealing moments at the cabin while he saved children's lives. Now we're just two people who destroyed a family for our own pleasure. They divorced a year later. No passionate declarations, no fighting for their love. Just quiet signatures on papers that officially ended their affair-turned-marriage. Lou had moved to New Jersey, trying to escape his reputation. Emma stayed in New York, clinging to her social connections even as they slowly dissolved. Now, watching Maya command the audience's attention, Emma saw what her selfishness had cost. Her daughter's professional success was a triumph she couldn't share. Every achievement was celebrated with Nathan, who had quietly supported Maya's medical career from Seattle. In the front row, Ethan sat with his wife, Sarah, their 1-year-old daughter asleep in his arms. He'd built a successful practice specializing in family trauma and betrayal recovery. His own experience had given him unique insight into helping others navigate similar paths. My brother, Maya gestured to Ethan, taught me that understanding comes from facing truth, not hiding from it. His work helping families heal from betrayal inspired my own commitment to medical ethics. Claire Williams wasn't present. She'd moved to Florida 3 years ago, unable to bear the weight of her role in the deception. Her attempts to justify her choices, I was protecting the family, had fallen on deaf ears. The twins maintained minimal contact, sending obligatory holiday cards and occasional photos of Ethan's daughter, whom she'd never met in person. The last row held a surprise guest. Dr. Nathan Williams, now chief of trauma surgery at Northwest Memorial, had flown in specifically for Maya's keynote. At 54, he remained imposing. Success and truth had preserved him better than guilt had preserved his ex-wife and brother. Beside him sat Dr. Sarah Chun, his colleague from Seattle, who had become more than a friend 2 years ago. Their relationship, built on shared medical dedication and absolute honesty, stood in stark contrast to the deception that had shaped his past. In trauma surgery, Maya's voice carried the same precision as Nathan's. We don't have time for anything but truth. A patient's life depends on accurate information, clear communication, and unwavering integrity. Emma remembered when those words could have described her marriage to Nathan. Now, they were a reflection of the man he had always been, the man she had betrayed. The applause was thunderous as Maya finished her speech, but Emma's hands remained at her sides, her champagne forgotten. In that moment, she understood the full weight of her choices, not just the betrayal of Nathan, but the loss of the respect and love of her children. Truth had prevailed, but it had left her behind. Before the lies, before Lou, before 15 years of Christmas cabin deceptions, she watched her daughter command the room with the same authority Nathan had once shown, knowing she'd lost the right to feel proud. After the speech, the audience moved to the reception area. Emma watched from a distance as Maya hugged Nathan and Sarah, as Ethan introduced his daughter to hospital board members, as her children lived successful lives that no longer included her. Quite a speech. Lou's voice came from behind her. He'd aged poorly too, his handsome features now heavy with regret. She's exactly like Nathan. She chose to be, Emma replied. We gave her a master class in what not to become. Their eyes met briefly, no trace remaining of the passion that had once seemed worth any price. Lou looked away first, moving toward the exit. He had a long drive back to his small New Jersey practice, where he treated routine cases instead of the complex surgeries he'd once performed. Across the room, Nathan was deep in conversation with the hospital board. Northwest Memorial's trauma unit had revolutionized emergency care under his leadership, and New York Medical wanted to implement his protocols. Success, Emma noted bitterly, had followed him while she and Lou had spiraled downward. Mom! Emma turned to find Ethan standing behind her. He'd learned to move quietly, part of his therapeutic approach. His daughter stirred in his arms, blue eyes, Lou's eyes, blinking sleepily. Hello, Ethan. She fought the urge to reach for the grandchild she barely knew. Congratulations on your practice's expansion. Thank you. His tone was professional, the same one he likely used with clients. We're helping a lot of families work through similar situations. Similar situations. Such a clinical term for devastating betrayal. Emma watched as his daughter reached for him, completely trusting. She remembered when her children had looked at her that way. Would you? She hesitated. Would you like to get coffee sometime? Meet properly with Emma. Ethan's expression remained neutral. I'll discuss it with Sarah. We're careful about who we let into Emma's life. Trust has to be earned. The irony of her son counseling others about trust while maintaining professional distance from her wasn't lost on Emma. She nodded, accepting his terms as the consequence of her choices. Maya's voice carried across the room as she discussed cardiac procedures with senior surgeons. She'd specialized in pediatric surgery, like Nathan, but chosen cardiology instead of trauma. Sometimes healing requires completely replacing damaged tissue, she was saying. Trying to repair something too compromised only prolongs the problem. The medical metaphor hit too close to home. Emma moved toward the exit, passing Claire's usual empty seat at these functions. Her former mother-in-law's absence was another reminder of collateral damage. Claire's life in Florida was lonely, filled with volunteer work and attempts at redemption that never quite succeeded. Her Christmas cards to the twins remained unanswered. She'd tried explaining herself in therapy, but the therapist's response had been uncomfortably direct. You chose to protect the wrongdoers instead of the victims. Have you considered that your guilt is appropriate? Outside the hospital, New York's evening air carried a hint of approaching autumn. Emma's apartment waited. A small place. Nothing like the home she'd shared with Nathan, or even the house she'd briefly lived in with Lou. Her interior design business had suffered when her social circle contracted. It turned out that women who could afford luxury design services preferred not to hire someone known for long-term deception. Her phone held no messages from Maya about the speech's success. Those updates went to Nathan and Sarah, who had become the mother figure Maya now trusted. Even Ethan's professional distance was more contact than Maya allowed. Across town, Lou poured himself a drink in his modest New Jersey home. His new practice provided a living, but nothing like his former success. Patients who'd followed him from New York gradually drifted away as the story spread. His colleagues' wives kept their distance, seeing him as a cautionary tale. His attempts to maintain relationships with the twins had failed spectacularly. Maya refused all contact. Ethan maintained minimal professional courtesy, but made it clear that Emma would know him only as a cautionary tale in family history. Biology doesn't equal fatherhood, Ethan had told him during their last real conversation. Nathan showed us that. You showed us the opposite. The twins' trust fund, finally accessible at 25, remained untouched. Maya and Ethan had built their careers without it, refusing to benefit from years of deception. The money sat in accounts, overseen by Nathan's attorney A. Testament to choices and consequences. Back at the reception, Nathan watched his children's successes with quiet pride. Maya's surgical skills had surpassed his own at her age. Ethan's insight helped others navigate the trauma of betrayal. They'd built lives on truth rather than comfort, just as he had. Ready to head back to Seattle? Sarah asked, her hand finding his. Their relationship, started in the trauma unit and built on shared values, stood as proof that trust was possible after betrayal. Almost, Nathan replied. Just need to confirm the details for Christmas. Christmas, once a season of deception, had been reclaimed. The twins would visit them in Seattle, bringing Emma for her second Christmas. No cabin trips, no convenient emergency room shifts, no hidden agendas, just family built on truth rather than biology. In her apartment that night, Emma looked at old photos. Maya's medical school graduation, attended from a distance. Ethan's wedding, where she'd sat in the back row while Nathan walked Maya down the aisle as best man. Emma's birth announcement, received through Ethan's assistant. She'd gained everything she thought she wanted with Lou: passion, excitement, the thrill of secret love. She'd lost everything that actually mattered: respect, trust, family bonds. That couldn't be rebuilt. Lou stared at his own collection of consequences: a smaller practice, distant children, a reputation permanently stained. The affair that had seemed worth any price had cost more than either of them could have imagined. Claire, in her Florida condo, surrounded herself with photos from before the lies, before the choices, before she'd chosen to protect the wrong people at the expense of the right ones. Her attempts at justification grew weaker each year. But in Seattle, Nathan prepared for another trauma surgery. His unit's success rate had set new standards. His relationship with Sarah added personal joy to professional satisfaction. His children's visits brought the comfort of honest relationships. Maya, driving home from her triumphant speech, called him on speakerphone. Dad, the board wants to implement your protocols. Would you consult? Of course, he replied. I'm proud of you, Maya. Not just for your success, but for building it on truth. Ethan, putting Emma to bed, felt no regret about maintaining professional boundaries with his biological father and former mother. His practice helped others understand that family wasn't about biology or social expectations. It was about choices, truth, and consistency. The night settled over New York, Seattle, New Jersey, and Florida. In 4 different locations, the consequences of choices made long ago played out in distinctly different ways. For those who had chosen deception, Emma, Lou, and Claire, each evening brought fresh reminders of what they'd lost. No amount of justification could fill the void left by broken trust. For those who had chosen truth, Nathan, Maya, and Ethan, each day brought the quiet satisfaction of lives built on solid foundations. They'd learned that healing didn't require forgiveness, just acknowledgement of reality and a commitment to honesty. The truth, as Nathan had known all along, was both scalpel and suture, cutting away diseased tissue while creating space for healthy growth. Some wounds never fully healed, but understanding why they existed brought its own form of peace. In the end, everyone had exactly what they'd chosen. Not what they'd wished for, not what they'd imagined, but what their actions had earned. It was perhaps the truest form of justice, living with the consequences of one's own decisions. The story continues in all their lives, but the moral remained constant. Truth, however painful, builds stronger foundations than comfortable lies. Nathan's surgical maxim had proven true in life as well as medicine. The hardest diagnosis is the one that forces us to re-examine everything we thought we knew about ourselves. And sometimes that diagnosis is exactly what we need to truly heal. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I'll see you there.